Because I would say that China and Venezuela are very misunderstood by a lot of people. So it's so important.
Well, actually, I would say they were around. I think they're very well understood by people that don't want the model. They don't like the word sovereignty, dignity, because they know what it means. That means that we're departing from their formula.
And they also know that it's effective, and that's why it really scares them, right?
China has done a remarkable transformation. I don't think in the history of the world there's been something as remarkable as alleviating poverty the way that China has done. And I think that China stands as an example, not something that has to be imitated, because everybody has their own particularities and their own conditions. But it is good to know that someone, a country or a people united to fight these problems, these challenges such as poverty, and we're able to achieve significant success. And it feels good to know that there is a socialist path towards development, towards the future. And the idea that maybe we can look into that and see how something like that could come out from our own initiative is inspiring. And I think that what's important for Latin America, for Africans, for other Asians, is to see China as a model, not to be imitated, but as a model to be a reference point, something that can be that can even inspire to promote your own transformations, because we all have to. There's a lot of conditions and problems and challenges that are particular to us that we have to deal with.
Do you see that happening on the ground in Venezuela right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're building our own path of independence, of transformation. I think there's a lot of. We always look to China to see what China has done, to see how some of these things can be somehow adopted or adapted to Venezuelan reality. I mean, we are people that are also very concerned about alleviating poverty, about transforming people's realities. I mean, the Bolivarian Revolution, came precisely in a moment where over 75% of Venezuela's population was under the state of poverty, and President Chavez did an enormous contribution by changing the way we ran the country and reaffirming national sovereignty over resources and building regionalism and multilateralism, all these things that help build the country we have. Unfortunately, after President Chavez passed away, there was a decision by the enemies of Venezuela and the enemies of the Venezuelan Revolution to impose these attacks and these measures that have affected severely our economy. But I also think that Venezuela didn't give up. Venezuela, under the leadership of President Maduro, became a place where continued to bet on socialist path, on not adopting neoliberal policies, on trying to be creative. I think that's probably one of the best lessons that we can learn from China. So China has always bet on creativity to promote development. So Venezuela is also trying to be creative in its own way and with its own resources and its own conditions, but also to find its own path to development. Yes. And we've been successful. I mean, even despite all the attacks that we have, I mean, right now the Venezuelan economy has improved in the last 2-3 years significantly, and we're on an optimist path. We know we're strengthening relationships of the communes, the relationships of people, popular organizations throughout the country, and I think that's a huge jump from a previous moment in Venezuelan history where there was no interest in strengthening the national forces.
I think that was all so incredibly said, and you pointed to so many important parts. And I really love what you said about how we're not just applying one thing and taking it to another place, right? And China has also never asked or even requested anyone to look towards China's, you should do it just like us. No, of course not. We also respect the sovereignty and the how somewhere has its unique conditions and needs to develop on its own terms, right? We're not going to be like the US and tell people how to do what. Exactly. And I think, like you said, Venezuela has its own material conditions and it faces these extreme challenges from the US and yet remains optimistic and continues to move forward on a creative path towards socialism. I think that is really important for people to know, because I would say that China and Venezuela are very misunderstood by a lot of people. So it's so important.
Well, actually, I would say they were around. I think they're very well understood by people that don't want the model to, or independent models to be out there.
Right.
I think there are interests, specific interests, that want to prevent this creativity, or they want to prevent this independence. They don't like the word sovereignty, dignity, because they know what it means. That means that we're departing from their formula. So they know very well
They
what they're
know.
doing.
Yes. The ones who are trying to stop it, or to make everyone else misunderstand us, they know exactly what they're doing and how it works. And they also know that it's effective, and that's why it really scares them, right? So I think with all that, I mean, you also said that Latin America is seen by the U.S. as an appendix of Latin America, of the U.S.,
Yes.
which is very apparent in the way that they act, the way that they move, even the way that they talk about Latin America. So I would ask you right now, like, what are some of the challenges that Venezuela faces today from the U.S. and from U.S. imperialism?
Well, I mean, there's still, this use of unilateral coercive measures. Or, we call them sanctions for purposes of simplicity, but really they're not sanctions because they're illegal measures taken without the approval of the United Nations, without any backdrop of international law. So that continues to be, of course, a strong hit on the Venezuelan economy and on the possibility of development. Of more recent times, we've seen that unfortunately the political narratives and the political struggles within the United States have also taken a turn into demonizing Venezuelan migrants.
Yes.
And we have seen terrible actions. I mean, we just a couple of days ago, a group of Venezuelans was finally able to return to Venezuela due to President Maduro's diplomatic agency, but they had been taken to a prison in El Salvador without due process, alleging that they were members of a gang, just feeding into this massive hysteria inside the United States against migrants and against working class people, which is what they are. And it was very unfortunate because these people were, we didn't know what was going to happen. These people suffered torture, suffered disturbing aggressions, and also there's currently I believe it's 33 or 34 children that have been separated from their families, and these are children that all of Venezuelan society is asking for their return. So it's something very important that we denounce these type of aggressions. But Venezuela doesn't want, Venezuela has always been open to diplomacy.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the important aspects of relations with anybody around the world is always establishing a relationship of respect, mutual respect. If you have mutual respect, then you can talk about anything and you can solve differences, you can move forward. And I think that's the type of relations that we look for. I think that's also a point of unity with China. Because, in the last couple of years, I believe around 2020, a group of Friends of the United Nations Charter was formed. China is a member as well as Venezuela. And this is a group of about 20 countries that have said, we need to respect international law. We need to adhere once again to the principles, the founding principles of the United Nations. I mean, this is an important year. It's 80 years of the victory against fascism. It's the founding of the United Nations. We have to go back to understanding international relations under those terms, on the terms of cooperation, defending peace. And I think that's something both China, Venezuela, and hopefully, you mentioned BRICS.
Yes.
And I think, that those are the spaces of cooperation and of development that we should strive for.